He is Bob Pollock, joins us each Friday. Most of the time. Last week we had a pinch hitter for you. Talking bees last week.
Yeah, how about that?
She was really good. She was
Yeah,
great.
see?
I liked her.
That's good.
She can come back anytime.
All right.
Anytime instead of you. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. We can probably arrange that.
You can give Bob a
just
call.
like we did last week.
479-1160 or 349-WCCS. That's 349-9227. I have a question for you that came up this week in conversation. Somebody wanted to know, now that my garden is cleaned out and it's starting to get all weedy again, can I just churn that up and then cover it over with black plastic so no more come back, and just keep it covered over with black plastic all the way through the winter? That's what they wanted to know.
Yes, you could do that.
You could do that. Yeah. Okay. What would be the effect of it? Would it be a negative effect, a positive effect, no effect at all?
Well, depending on the type of black plastic.
Mm-hmm.
If it's solid black, heavy black plastic,
Yeah.
like 6 mil plastic or something,
Uh-huh.
that's going to prevent any moisture from getting in the ground too.
And you want the moisture.
I don't think we want to really dry the soil out.
Okay.
Now it's going to creep in from the sides, but in the middle of the garden, everything that hits that's going to run off.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had a fabric, that would be a better option.
Okay.
To cover it with. That way, those are usually woven materials, or they'll let water through.
Mm-hmm.
They may not let all the water through, but they'll let most of it through.
Okay. So they're figuring with covering with black plastic, that'll prevent more weeds from forming
Yes.
in the early spring.
Now, another way to do that would be to put it on now,
Mm-hmm.
and then take it off in November.
Uh-huh.
The only weeds that will germinate over the winter, or late fall, early winter, usually are the chickweeds, and then when we get into February and March, then we can get into some other ones that'll come in that are winter annual weeds.
Uh-huh.
So you could put that on there for a while this fall to help minimize most of those, and then take it off. And then put it back on, in late February even, just to help prevent any of those winter annuals from jumping in there.
Before the new crop of spring weeds starts to come up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. A little extra labor there, but that was the question that came up. So, but the permeable cover would be better.
Yeah, just from the moisture perspective and leaving a little moisture in the soil.
Yeah, and you like to plant a cover crop anyway.
Yes,
that you're going to plow under.
And that doesn't have to be done every year, but it should be done along the way.
Okay.
Just to help, because if that's your garden area and that's going to be your garden area for decades, then you need to take care of that over that time and add organic matter back into it. And of course, growing a living cover crop is one way to do that.
Spreading fertilizer on the garden in the fall, or through the course of the winter even. Good idea, bad idea?
If it's worked in, we don't want it to move off site. So the phosphorus and potassium that may be in that fertilizer, oftentimes we'll put manure on in the fall.
Yeah.
And that's fine. One advantage to that is that not all those nutrients are available as soon as you put it on the ground when you're putting an organic source.
So it's like time release.
Yeah, because that manure has to break down in order for those nutrients to be released. Now, granted, a granular fertilizer also has to be broken down, but with a little bit of moisture, it'll turn into a liquid pretty quickly.
Okay.
Because you can put fertilizer in a bucket, add some water, stir it up, and you can watch it dissolve in there. And so that's the same thing that happens when you put it in the soil. When it's subjected to moisture, then each one of those pearls will the coating will come off and slowly keep melting down.
Yeah. Okay.
The nitrogen part, and that's another reason to take a soil test this time of year, so that if you need to add some nutrients, you can get them on now, especially the phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and then lime, if we need to adjust the pH.
Okay.
Lime takes months, at least several months, to break down and to affect the pH.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's good to get that on in the fall.
Okay.
Or you can put it on in early spring. If you're just tweaking, if you don't need to change much and you're just putting a light amount on, not as critical. But if we're at a pH of 5.5, or you're moving into a new area where you want to garden, and say that pH is more acidic, and we need to move it from in the 5s into the mid 6s or higher, then that takes time.
Let me throw a hypothetical at you. Somebody who's been planting their garden in the same place for 20, 25, 30 years, and always has the tomatoes in the same place, always has the cucumbers, the peppers, everything gets planted in the same place all the time. And their crops are not doing as well for the last 3, 4, 5 years as they once did. How common is that? Is the solution finding out just what the soil nutrient level is? Talk about when a garden that has been a good producer for you for years suddenly starts to falter a little bit.
And there can be a combination of reasons why that decline occurs.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime we grow the same crop, I mean, we would refer to that as a monoculture, where we grow the same crop in the same ground year after year after year, or rotation after rotation. And so eventually those plants grow a certain way. They use a certain group of nutrients. Some use more of certain things than others, depending on the plant, whether it's a vegetative plant like lettuce or cabbage versus a fruiting crop like tomatoes or peppers.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll use a little bit different quantities of nutrients and remove those. So when you harvest a crop, you're removing nutrients from that plot of ground.
Okay.
All right? Because the plant absorbs those, uses those, has those in them, and then we harvest it and take it off.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing nutrient removal. So that's why it's good to not always grow that same crop in that same ground for too long.
Okay.
We can often get away with it for a while. The other thing that can...
Of course, some people don't have a choice.
Right. The other thing that can build up over time is certain pests, whether they be insects, diseases, nematodes, all those things, that complex can build up, and they can be harmful. So sometimes when you replant, those organisms are already there, so they kind of cause problems on the crop from day one.
They're just waiting for you to replant in
the
spring. But we're getting a little bit hungry here in the spring.
So moving those around to unrelated plants helps kind of break up those cycles a little bit. Okay. Although on a postage stamp garden, it's hard to break that up because the distance is not very far.
Yeah. I want to go in another direction this morning because I came home last night. We were in for a meeting here in Indiana, and we went back home, and one of the neighbors up the road had decided, let's gather up some of these early leaves and burn them. So the whole neighborhood smells like burnt leaves when you get home. You notice it all throughout the houses. And you say to yourself, okay, it's fall. Burning leaves, we've talked about this in the past. Burning leaves, what does it do? Is it advisable to do? Is it harmful to do?
Yeah, it used to be extremely common. And granted, it does reduce the volume in a hurry. Mm-hmm. So you go from all this very bulky material into a pile of ashes.
Sure.
So that's a reason to do it. But it would be more useful
to chop them up.
Yeah, chop them up, compost them on site. A lot, with these mulching mowers and things we have today, and some of the horsepower that's behind some of those, they chop up those leaves in pretty small bits. Redistributes that on the yard, and so that's actually adding organic matter that's going to break down a little bit of nutrients, not a lot, but a little bit, that get added back to that plot of ground. So both the organic matter and the nutrients help out the lawn in this case. Uh-huh. You can do the same thing on beds. Chop them up, and then apply a layer. Use it as mulch.
Mm-hmm. But don't stink up the neighborhood.
Yeah. So if you had the option not to, we would prefer not to do that.
Yeah, we were assaulted by leaves last night, and then earlier this week we were assaulted by manure.
Yeah.
So it's been a great week.
You've had all kinds of good smells.
It's been a really good week.
It's kind of that time of the year too, when manure can, and from a farming perspective, when you can get on the ground and not cause a lot of damage to it. It's dry enough that you can get on there with equipment, spread that manure, and not cause compaction on the ground.
Yeah.
You also may have a manure storage that needs emptied, or the barn needs cleaned out.
Exactly. That's what happened this week.
Yeah, and
the barn needed cleaning up.
Got to keep that cleaned out because eventually there'll be no room for the animals.
That's the plan.
So you got to do that, and this is one of those times a year when you can do that. And you may also be preparing to plant some fall crops, some fall grains that will overwinter, like winter wheat, winter barley, and so you can get that on there, spread, work it in, and then get your crop planted.
Last weekend of summer, pretty soon we're going to be talking about putting the poinsettias in the dark.
Yes, October.
It's pretty soon time
usually,
to do that.
Yeah, October.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, boys and girls. So that's fair warning. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. Who knows what we'll get into next week?
That's right.
All right. He's Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, AM 1160 and 101.1 FM.